Hello, everyone. Welcome to this discussion of deviant workplace behavior. Have you ever reacted negatively to something that somebody did at work? If so, what was it the person did, and why do you think he or she did it? Those are questions I'd like to explore with you over the next 10 minutes or so in this presentation on workplace deviance. In studying workplace deviance, sometimes referred to as occupational deviance, Sandra Robinson and Rebecca Bennett have constructed and published a typology of deviant workplace behaviors. They define workplace deviance as voluntary behavior that violates significant organizational norms, and in so doing, threatens the well-being of an organization, its members, or both. To complete their study, they recruited 70 full-time workers and asked each of them to describe 2 incidents of someone at work engaging in something considered deviant at their workplace. That is something they thought to be wrong. After receiving the written responses, Robinson and Bennett removed the repeated descriptions and narrowed the list down to 45 different deviant workplace behaviors. Next, they recruited 180 additional respondents and gave each of them the list of deviant behaviors. The respondents rated the similarities and differences between pairs of behaviors using a Likert scale ranging from 1 to 9, 1 being very similar, 9 being very different. In addition, the respondents indicated the criteria they used when rating the similarities and differences. Finally, Robinson and Bennett derived a list of potential labels or attributes to categorize the reasons that respondents said they used to compare deviant behaviors. Using the respondent data, they classified 4 categories of deviant behaviors along 2 dimensions. The first dimension deals with the seriousness of the offense, minor versus serious, while the second dimension focuses on the target of the deviant behavior, interpersonal versus organizational. The list of deviant behaviors you see on the slide are the most typical behaviors for each of the 4 categories. In a moment, we'll take a closer look at each category with a focus on combining the disciplines of sociology and psychology to begin thinking about potential causes of workplace deviance. On a sociological level, organizations exercise power over individuals. To be more specific, organizations emphasize conformity. They reward going along, being part of a team, and avoiding being a whistleblower. On a psychological level, organizational power generates frustration among employees, and workplace deviance may be resistance to that power. Of course, there are many different forms and causes of workplace deviance. Many more different forms than what I have presented here. I'm only providing a starting point for thinking about the topic. The lower left quadrant, political deviance, contains minor but relatively minor but still harmful acts of deviance, interpersonally speaking. This category refers to social interactions that put other individuals at a disadvantage. Examples include a boss showing favoritism towards certain employees, gossiping, which could be an employee gossiping about coworkers or the manager, or a boss gossiping about employees. Other examples might be an employee blaming coworkers for mistakes, or a boss blaming employees for his or her mistakes, and employees competing with coworkers in a non-beneficial way. Some research, in particular Oganyemi's research on abusive supervision and workplace deviance, suggests that political deviance may be a response to supervisors abusing their authority. In this case, it's not poor supervision on a systemic level by which employees might blame the entire company for its incompetence in hiring bad supervisors. Rather, the employees might blame the individual supervisor for not following interpersonal or organizational norms. The norms broken by the supervisor may be folkways rather than mores. For example, the supervisor may be attempting to influence others using moral persuasion or one-sided negotiations, or perhaps through praise that feels insincere. If unfair supervision is practiced, retaliation can occur. Employees may take their frustration out on fellow employees if they have no opportunity to confront their immediate supervisor or are afraid to do so. The lower right quadrant, personal aggression, refers to behaving in a hostile and interpersonally harmful manner. Let's see if I can get this highlighted here. Yeah. This category refers to behaving in a hostile manner toward other individuals. Examples include sexual harassment of an employee by a boss or sexual harassment of an employee by a coworker, verbal abuse of an employee from a boss or verbal abuse of a customer from an employee stealing a customer's or coworker's possessions, and an employee endangering coworkers by reckless behavior. An interesting and relatively consistent research finding has been that employees mimic deviant behavior of their leaders and coworkers. Consistent with the social learning theory of Albert Bandura, opportunities to witness bosses or coworkers exercise force may signal over time that this form of behavior is appropriate and even commendable, especially if they see the boss not getting punished or obtaining rewards for the forceful behavior. Of course, it's important to consider the level of power imbalance in the workplace when thinking about the difference between political deviance and personal aggression. For example, many studies find that sexual harassment of women occurs more frequently in male-dominated workplaces, such as the military, where there are sharp distinctions in social status. The aggression may be a way to reinforce cultural norms of superiority, expertise, or accomplishments. The upper left quadrant, production deviance, refers to, this contains relatively minor but costly forms of behaviors in the workplace. Oops, I'm getting a little crazy here. I'm not used to this, but this category refers to violating organizational norms regarding the quantity and quality of work performed. Examples include a boss leaving early or leaving work for employees to do, an employee taking excessive breaks or intentionally working slow, and an employee wasting company resources by turning up the heat or opening the windows. One factor linked to production deviance may be job dissatisfaction. According to Bolin and Heatherly, in their study on the predictors of employee deviance, dissatisfaction results in a higher incidence of minor offenses, but does not necessarily lead to severe offenses. Employees who are not satisfied with their work may become less productive if they have very little autonomy or control over their destiny. Perhaps they work in a disciplined setting with many company policies, rules, regulations, and processes that are laid down and enforced by the management. Another point to consider is the potential relationship between interpersonal and organizational workplace deviance. If people experience or witness interpersonal workplace deviance, they may emotionally and physically withdraw from the organization. The upper right quadrant, property deviance, contains relatively serious and costly workplace behaviors. Well, this category refers to acquiring or damaging property belonging to one's employer. Examples include an employee sabotaging equipment or merchandise, accepting kickbacks, lying about the number of hours worked, and stealing company equipment or merchandise. Property deviance may be a reaction to systemic discrimination in the workplace. While everyone at work may feel the pressure of discipline, not everyone may experience discrimination. For example, workers may retaliate against an organization if some employees are rewarded more than others based on race, gender, or some other group characteristic. The discrimination may lead to beliefs among employees that the company violates mores rather than folkways. If feelings of procedural injustice emerge, the employees may feel entitled to direct and serious retaliation against the company. To summarize, typologies are useful because they bring order to a diverse set of behaviors. The workplace typology created by Robinson and Bennett, reveals the different types of threats to interpersonal and organizational well-being in the workplace. However, the researchers acknowledge that not everyone agrees on what constitutes a threat. In other words, deviance is that to what some people react negatively. Is the use of work time to make personal phone calls a waste of company resources? For example, if the Phone call was made to check up on a sick relative? For some people, yes. For others, no. For some employees, this may not be a waste of company resources because it allows them the ability to focus more on their job rather than on what's going on in their personal life, and thus increases performance. To cite other examples, employee gossip may not be viewed deviant by some people because it assists in establishing workplace norms. Even verbal abuse or harassment may not be defined deviant if such actions assist in functional turnover. By that I mean getting low-functioning employees to leave voluntarily. Typologies function as sense-making tools. They show how a concept varies in a general and useful fashion depending on the purposes of the researcher. And that brings us to the limitation of typologies. They are tied to the perspective of the researcher and cannot reveal all of the different interpretations of a phenomenon.